5 days remain before the Thousand Elders Banquet, and beneath the Great Sui capital's scholarly calm, knives are already being sharpened. Cui Dongshan has begun pulling hidden threads among officials and cultivators, while Chen Ping'an learns that Li Baoping and the other academy students may become pawns in a scheme capable of reigniting war with the Great Li Empire. Even as Mao Xiaodong prepares a precious scholarly core for him, another plan is taking shape. Chen Ping'an may have to step beyond the academy's protection and become the bait that draws the conspirators into the open. Someone has been arguing at the wine shop that Pei Qian is secretly a princess. Li Huai is a peerless treasure master, and any man foolish enough to disagree must pay for the next jar. Judging by the laughter outside, our familiar band of wandering daoists has returned at exactly the right moment. Pour yourself something warm, and come hear the latest rumors, because tonight the children's harmless mischief sits frighteningly close to a storm that could shake an entire continent. Lin Shouyi showed no surprise when Chen Ping'an appeared at his door. News of his friend's arrival had reached him earlier, yet after a brief hesitation, he had chosen not to visit the guest quarters. That quiet decision suited him perfectly. Reserved, disciplined, and never one to let sentiment casually interrupt cultivation. Chen Ping'an had not come empty-handed. From Ganoderma Inn, he had purchased an incomplete scripture concerning lightning techniques, a solitary surviving copy missing dozens of pages. Even damaged, its value was considerable. Had it remained whole, the price would have been almost impossible to measure. Lin Shouyi accepted the scripture without unnecessary ceremony. For cultivators, a suitable technique can outweigh ordinary treasure, especially when it aligns with one's path. Chen Ping'an was not merely giving away wealth. He was placing a potentially important stepping stone onto Lin Shouyi's road toward the Great Tao.
Zai asked me to pass along a message. If you don't mind, she invites you to cultivate at her place every day.
Lin Shouyi considered the invitation rather than answering immediately.
All right. Whenever I'm free, I'll go there in the mornings.
Chen Ping'an had intended only a short visit. His chair had hardly warmed before he rose to leave. When Lin Shouyi had opened the door earlier, Chen Ping'an had clearly seen him seated upon a straw mat, regulating his breathing. Time spent talking was time taken away from cultivation. Yet just as Chen Ping'an was about to depart, Lin Shouyi unexpectedly smiled.
Chen Ping'an, do you know why I'm willing to accept something this valuable from you?
Why?
Lin Shouyi almost never invited anyone into his dormitory, but today he broke that habit. He returned to the table, poured 2 cups of tea, and silently made room for a longer conversation. Chen Ping'an understood the gesture and sat down again. The years had refined Lin Shouyi into an elegant young cultivator. After a moment of silence, he finally gave his answer.
Because I know that one day I'll repay this favor with something even more valuable.
Chen Ping'an merely smiled and nodded. That answer was Lin Shouyi through and through, aloof on the surface, fiercely proud underneath. He did not regard accepting kindness as weakness because, in his heart, debts between true companions were not burdens. They were promises waiting for the right day to be repaid. Lin Shouyi then glanced toward the bamboo bookcase in his room. The faint curve at the corner of his mouth made his next question suspiciously obvious.
There's another matter for which I can never thank you enough. Guess what it is?
Chen Ping'an was nearly speechless. Lin Shouyi had practically pointed at the answer himself.
I only gave you a bamboo bookcase. The bamboo did come from Go Table Mountain, but honestly, that bookcase can't possibly be worth more than this lightning scripture.
Lin Shouyi shook his head. Chen Ping'an searched his memories of their long journey toward the Great Sui nation, trying to identify what Lin Shouyi truly meant. Chen Ping'an searched his memories of their long journey toward the Great Sui nation, trying to identify what Lin Shouyi truly meant.
Was it what happened at that inn?
Lin Shouyi shook his head again, then broke into rare laughter. Whatever answer he carried in his heart, he had no intention of revealing it today.
Don't think you can waste my time and delay my cultivation just because you brought me a gift.
And with that, Chen Ping'an was cheerfully driven from the room, still completely unable to solve the mystery. Sometimes the deepest gratitude in the Jianghu is not attached to the most expensive treasure. The fact that Lin Shouji refused to explain suggests that what Chen Ping'an once did for him mattered on a far more personal level. After finishing his visits to Xianxia, Yu Lu, and Lin Shouyi, Chen Ping'an did not retrace his steps. He had delivered everything nearly an hour earlier than expected, so he chose a quiet detour through the secluded paths of Mountain Cliff Academy. Near the dormitories, he suddenly noticed Li Huai sneaking through the night by himself. The moment Li Huai spotted Chen Ping'an, secrecy was forgotten, and the boy hurried straight toward him.
Chen Ping'an, I came here especially to ask you something. If I don't get an answer, I won't be able to sleep tonight.
Is this about Pei Qian? Go ahead.
Li Huai lowered his voice, as though he were about to discuss a secret concerning the fate of kingdoms.
At first I thought Pei Qian was lying, but the more she talked, the more incredible she sounded. Chen Ping'an, tell me truthfully, is Pei Qian really a princess who became lost among ordinary people?
Chen Ping'an could almost see Pei Qian's solemn little face as she spun one grand tale after another, while secretly enjoying herself. She had already deceived 3 seasoned guards at Foxtown in the Great Quan Empire. Compared with them, fooling Li Huai, Liu Guan, and Ma Lian was hardly a challenge. Still, Chen Ping'an had no desire to destroy an innocent game between children. Pei Qian's boasting caused no real harm, while exposing her would only extinguish the small world of imagination that had formed among them. Chen Ping'an understood when truth mattered, and when kindness mattered more. He patted Li Huai on the shoulder.
You can figure that out yourself.
Li Huai's eyes immediately brightened with the confidence of someone who had misunderstood absolutely everything.
All right, I understand now.
What exactly do you understand?
Li Huai folded his arms and rubbed his chin, already preparing himself for tomorrow's decisive confrontation.
No wonder that tan girl looked down on my painted wooden puppet. Tomorrow I'll compete with her in wealth. When experts clash, aura is what truly matters. We'll see who owns more treasures. Princess or not, what's so impressive? She's already carrying a bamboo sword and bamboo saber around her waist as if she wants to frighten people. All right, what does the princess like to eat?
Chen Ping'an placed a hand on Li Huai's head, physically turned him toward the dormitories, and ended the matter before the boy could invent an entire campaign against Pei Qian. Satisfied beyond measure, Li Huai ran away. His peace lasted only a short while before an angry shout echoed across the academy grounds. Satisfied beyond measure, Li Huai ran away. His peace lasted only a short while before an angry shout echoed across the academy grounds. There was little mystery about what had happened. A teacher on night patrol had caught him wandering outside. Chen Ping'an was about to intervene when Li Huai reappeared, swaggering toward him with Zhu Lian beside him, as though he had just survived some legendary calamity. Zhu Lian had already improvised an excuse. He claimed to be Li Huai's distant relative, and said that, being unfamiliar with Mountain Cliff Academy, especially at night, he required the boy to guide him back to the guest quarters. Li Huai raised a thumb toward Chen Ping'an, overflowing with admiration.
Big brother Zhu is truly chivalrous. Chen Ping'an, you're really fortunate to have a steward like him.
Then he turned toward the hunchbacked old martial artist with an expression of great righteousness.
Big brother Zhu, if Chen Ping'an treats you badly in the future, come find me. Li Huai, it'll help you seek justice.
Zhu Lian studied the boy from head to toe. Li Huai seemed wonderfully ordinary, perhaps even somewhat simple-minded, and certainly did not carry the aura of some terrifying prodigy. After meeting people tied to the jeweled small world such as Zheng Dafeng, Li Li Baozhen, and Li Baoping, Zhu Lian finally believed he had discovered one person from that place who was not outrageously abnormal. To Zhu Lian this was almost comforting. After repeatedly encountering monsters disguised as ordinary people, Li Huai's apparent mediocrity felt like proof that the heavens had not completely abandoned common sense. Then Zhu Lian's expression changed. The more he looked, the more Li Huai resembled Li the terrifying 10th-tier martial artist who had once appeared in Old Dragon City. Both carried the surname Li. As a pure martial artist himself, Zhu Lian understood exactly what the end tier represented. He possessed tremendous confidence in his own talent and believed that, had he grown up in the majestic world rather than the lotus flower-blessed land, reaching the 9th tier would not have been excessively difficult. But the 10th tier was another matter entirely. The distance between those realms was not simply another step upward. To martial artists, the end tier stood like a mountain whose summit could be seen, yet remained unreachable to nearly everyone beneath it. Julian looked toward Chen Ping'an with a silent question in his eyes. Chen Ping'an smiled and nodded. That tiny nod shattered Julian's brief happiness. The seemingly ordinary Li Huai was indeed connected to Li. Julian's irritation surged instantly, and he gave Li Huai a light kick from behind.
Why are you still wandering around at midnight? Are you trying to catch lonely ghosts? Hurry up and scram.
Li Huai jumped forward in fright, then spun around and pointed accusingly at Julian.
You helped me once and kicked me once, so our gratitude and grievances are settled. If we meet at the academy tomorrow, whoever runs first is the greatest.
Julian calmly raised his leg again. Li Huai vanished into the darkness with astonishing speed. Elsewhere, inside Li Baoping's dormitory, another struggle was taking place, one involving neither fists nor immortal treasures. Li Baoping and Pei Qian sat opposite each other at the same table, both transcribing texts. Li Baoping's brush flew across the paper like a swift sword. Pei Qian's brush crawled forward like a turtle climbing a mountain. Each time Li Baoping completed another page, she sent it aside with cheerful efficiency, flexed her wrist, and walked over to inspect Pei Qian's miserable progress.
Off you go.
Pei Qian said nothing. Sweat already covered her forehead. After boasting like a hidden princess before Li Huai, she now faced a far more merciless opponent: homework. In the martial world, even the greatest storytellers eventually encounter an enemy they cannot bluff. Far from Mountain Cliff Academy, the atmosphere changed completely. In a provincial city neighboring the capital of the Great Sui nation, the recently relocated Kai clan received a midnight visitor of extraordinarily troublesome seniority. The visitor was Cui Dongshan. Following his earlier confrontation with Cai Jingshen at Mountain Cliff Academy, where a terrifying collection of treasures had helped him crush his opponent, Cui Dongshan had shamelessly claimed the title of patriarch over the Kai clan. Now, deep in the night, the white-robed youth hammered upon the Kai residence gate with enough force to make the courtyard boom.
Little Kayer, hurry up and open the door.
Behind him stood the short, sturdy Wei Xian, while beside Wei Xian waited a yellow bull. Within the residence, Cai Jingshen, the Kai clan's old ancestor, a nascent-tier cultivator and guest elder of the Great Sui nation, emerged from a secluded chamber with a face darkened by fury. With one leap, he landed outside the residence.
Cui Dongshan, what are you doing here?
Their feud was no secret. Above East Mountain, known locally as Little East Mountain, the two had once fought so violently that residents of the Great Sui capital treated the spectacle like a free display of celestial fireworks. Before that battle, the Kai clan had been proud and imposing, backed by a nascent-tier ancestor. Not long afterward, however, most of the clan withdrew from the capital. Only a single official remained behind to maintain their enormous residence, a mansion extravagant enough to rival those of the highest nobles. Cui Dongshan laughed, as if he had arrived at the home of a beloved relative rather than an enemy.
Jingshen, how courteous. You personally came out to greet me. Come, let's enter our house and have a proper chat. I entered the city late, there's a curfew, and am starving. Have someone prepare midnight snacks, while this grandfather spends some quality time with his grandson.
You are not welcome here.
Cui Dongshan instantly sprang into theatrical outrage.
You unfilial bastard. Now you're denying your own ancestor. Come, let's fight again. If you can withstand 50 immortal treasures, this time I'll call you ancestor. But if you lose tomorrow, Yao, ride through the city, shouting 1,000 times that you're Cui Dongshan's obedient grandson.
Cai Jingshen's teeth nearly ground together.
I would rather die than suffer that humiliation. Kill me tonight, if you wish, but I want to take one step outside this residence.
Cui Dongshan vanished. His movement resembled an ordinary land-shortening technique, yet the mystery hidden within it differed from conventional Daoist methods. Almost immediately, he returned to his original position.
Made up your mind, planning to cut your own neck. You're an unfilial grandson, but I have no choice except to acknowledge the family connection. I can even lend you several immortal treasures, so you don't complain that you lacked a suitable weapon.
The insults continued without mercy. Cai Jingshen's anger grew until the qi inside his dantian began to churn chaotically, and his aura surged outward. Then Cui Dongshan stopped smiling.
Little bastard, you probably think I gained an unfair advantage during our academy battle. So you've never accepted that defeat, have you?
At that instant, the mood transformed. Cai Jingshen's thoughts became disordered as he saw Cui Dongshan's pupils turn vertical, flooded with dazzling golden light. It felt as though a primordial flood dragon had opened its eyes, not a playful youth, not an arrogant scholar. Something ancient and unrestrained seemed to be staring directly through Cai Jingshen's body and into his soul. This was the true danger of Cui Dongshan. His ridiculous behavior encouraged others to underestimate him, but behind the laughter stood an existence capable of forcing even a nascent tier Earth immortal to reassess whether a single moment of pride was worth risking his life. Cai Jingshen immediately withdrew his surging aura and extended a hand toward the residence.
Please come inside.
Behind the gates, an elderly steward who had been peeking through the crack suddenly felt a bone-deep chill. Whatever he had sensed beyond the doors left him trembling as he hurried to open them. Cui Dongshan swaggered through first, as though the residence truly belonged to him. Cai Jingshen followed, with Wei Xian and the Yellow Bull bringing up the rear. The old steward could only sigh inwardly. After finally escaping Cui Dongshan's shadow, Cai Jingshen had recently restored some of the clan's prestige by helping the provincial governor eliminate an elusive river demon. The Cai clan had barely enjoyed a few peaceful days before this calamity arrived at their gate again. The steward could only pray that tonight might somehow end with both sides benefiting, rather than another disaster descending upon the clan. Once inside, Cui Dongshan demanded sincere midnight refreshments. Cai Jingshen swallowed his anger and even brought out a pot of the provincial city's finest wine for Wei Xian. Then the Yellow Earth Bull, despite being merely at the Dragon Gate tier, demanded an entire courtyard for itself. Cai Jingshen found the request outrageous. Unfortunately, outrage changed nothing. He endured it. After dismissing 2 curious maidservants, Cai Jingshen finally stood alone with Cui Dongshan and abandoned all patience.
What exactly do you want? Get to the point.
Cui Dongshan casually raised one leg onto his chair. Wine in one hand, chopsticks in the other, he ate as though the matter he was about to discuss involved nothing more dangerous than tomorrow's weather.
You've been a powerful figure in the Great Sui capital for more than a century. Tell me who are the fools manipulating the assassination plot from behind the curtain.
I already know about General Tang Xuanxian of the Agile Cavalry Assistant Minister, Lang Taoju from the Ministry of War and Dragon, and Bull General, Mao Ren. Don't waste my time naming them. You and I both know those people aren't the true masterminds, hidden within the Great Sui Imperial Court and its mountains. So tell me who else is involved.
Cai Jingshen's eyelids twitched. That tiny reaction was enough to confirm Cui Dongshan's suspicion. The old cultivator knew far more than he wished to reveal. The playful midnight visit had finally shown its blade. Cui Dongshan tossed aside a marinated duck leg, licked his finger, and glanced sideways at Cai Jingshen with a faint smile.
For every true mastermind you name, I'll allow you to give me one additional name, completely unrelated to the plot. It can be an old enemy of yours, or some clan member you've hated for years.
He burped loudly, then calmly tightened the noose.
The offer lasts only while I'm eating. Once the midnight snacks are finished, the Kai clan loses this chance forever. And perhaps you don't know this yet, but that descendant you've left in the capital, the scholar working at the Imperial Academy, is also being used as a sacrificial pawn.
As a scholar, of course he does want the Great Sui nation to bow its head before the Great Li Empire. The Gao clan has raised scholars for centuries, so I can understand why someone might wish to sacrifice himself for his country.
But my understanding won't save anyone. Cui Dongshan, the choice is yours.
Cui Dongshan immediately returned to eating, leaving the old ancestor to confront the consequences in silence. Cui Dongshan finally spoke, his tone grave.
I need to confirm one thing first. Is Kai Feng truly deeply involved in this matter?
Cui Dongshan answered with a sneer.
Do I really need to explain Kai Feng's scholarly temperament and grand ambitions to you? Have you genuinely started treating me as the Kai clan's old ancestor?
Pain appeared on Cui Dongshan's face. He was a nascent-tier Earth immortal, one of the Great Sui imperial court's few great guest elders, someone capable of looking down upon ordinary nobles. But tonight he was not merely a powerful cultivator. He was the ancestor of a clan. For cultivators who live far beyond ordinary mortal lifespans, protecting descendants becomes another form of responsibility. Dead ancestors can offer only hidden virtue and ancestral blessing, but a living nascent-tier ancestor can guide talented descendants, spend resources on them, and carefully shape the clan's future without endangering his own cultivation. Whether those descendants pursued scholarship, military careers, or cultivation, whether they brought honor to the ancestral hall or opened new paths for later generations, these were matters Cui Dongshan had always considered part of his duty. Unfortunately, during the past century, the Kai clan had produced only one mediocre qi refiner. Cui Dongshan had provided that descendant with guidance and a large quantity of immortal coins, yet the cultivator remained trapped at the abode tier, with little hope of advancing far in the future. That was why so much of Cui Dongshan's hope had shifted toward Kai Feng, the scholar who had achieved second place in the imperial examination. Cui Dongshan had planned almost every major stage of Kai Feng's future, the next 50 or 60 years of official promotions, an honorable posthumous title from the emperor, the preservation of Kai Feng's yin soul after death, appointment by the Great Sui court as the city god of a prefectural city. From there, Kai Feng could serve for another century or more, accumulate merit, and slowly climb until he became city god of an entire provincial city. It was an extraordinary arrangement, almost a bridge spanning mortal officialdom, death, divine appointment, and continued cultivation. For a nascent-tier ancestor, this was close to the limit of how much one person could prepare for a descendant. Beyond that point, Kai Feng would have to seize his own opportunities on the great Tao. Fortune rises and falls like tides. Ordinary mortals may encounter only a single great opportunity in an entire lifetime, and even then they may fail to grasp it. Qi refiners possess one advantage: longevity. If they survive long enough, eventually fortune may turn in their favor. When that fortunate period arrives, secret immortal methods can sometimes preserve part of that accumulated destiny within the clan itself, much as mortal families preserve gold and silver. Generation after generation, wealth, influence, incense, and hidden fortune can gradually pile higher. Cui Dongshan had spent years preparing precisely such a path. And now Kai Feng had apparently thrown that carefully constructed future away. Without consulting his ancestor or the clan, the scholar had involved himself in an enormous conspiracy, capable of swallowing careers, families, and perhaps lives. That is why Cui Dongshan's pain runs deeper than simple anger. To him, Kai Feng has not merely committed a dangerous political mistake. He has gambled away decades of painstaking preparation and dragged the entire Kai clan toward a storm whose true masterminds remain hidden. Across the table, Cui Dongshan finally lowered his chopsticks. Cui Dongshan casually set down his chopsticks. He lowered his gaze, aligned the two slender sticks neatly beside one another, then looked up with a smile that seemed far too relaxed for the pressure hanging over the table.
It seems you're convinced that I won't kill anyone here.
He clapped his hands together and rose. There was no murderous aura, no violent outburst, yet that very calmness made his words feel heavier.
You made the right gamble. I'm not going to do whatever I please and start a killing spree here. I still have to return to Mountain Cliff Academy, after all. So be it. As your ancestor, this is as far as I can help you. From here onward, all of you will have to fend for yourselves.
Kai Jingshen raised a hand, signaling for Cui Dongshan to sit again. He had already conceded much tonight, but there was one point he could not simply take on faith.
How can you prove that you truly have the authority to call the shots in the imperial courts of both the Great Sui nation and the Great Li Empire?
Cui Dongshan leaned lazily against his chair and toyed with a strand of his own hair, looking nothing like a man discussing the fate of clans and kingdoms.
I have no way to prove it to you.
That answer should have been disastrous in an ordinary negotiation, yet Cui Dongshan said it precisely because the balance of power had already shifted. He did not need Xianxia's belief nearly as much as Kai Jingshan needed his help. Unable to force proof from him, Kai Jingshen retreated to the matter that concerned him most.
Then how are you going to get Kai Feng out of this mess? I need you to eliminate every hidden danger he may encounter and ensure that his future political career remains untouched. And I must remind you, Kai Feng cannot betray his allies merely to save himself or gain glory. If he does, his path toward becoming an official god after death will be obstructed.
Kai Feng will have a vital influence on the fortune of the Great Sui nation for many years to come. If he commits such a vile act, then even after death, the heritage of the Great Sui nation will reject him.
Cui Dongshan merely smiled.
I have my ways. Rest assured, during his lifetime, I guarantee that Kai Feng will become minister of one of the 6 ministries. The Ministry of Rights is the sole exception. That position is too important for him.
As for after his death within 100 years, I can ensure that he becomes the city god of a major province. The only exception is the Gao clan's province of origin.
A mortal official's career in life and divine appointment after death were both placed on the table, as though Cui Dongshan were arranging pieces on a board. Whether Cai Jingshan liked it or not, that confidence revealed the frightening scale on which Cui Dongshan was accustomed to planning.
And what of the reputation of the Kai clan and my own?
I'll have you and the Kai clan put on a convincing performance. By the time everything is over, people will be praising you from every direction. The history books will have nothing but glowing words for you.
Kai Jingshen opened his mouth, but hesitation stopped the words before they emerged.
Thinking about signing some official agreement with me. I advise you not to waste your thoughts on such unnecessary things, Kai Jingshen.
At once, the image of those vertical golden pupils flashed through Kai Jingshen's mind. Fear tightened around his heart. Tonight, both he and the entire Kai clan were effectively in Cui Dongshan's hands. It was an unbearable position for any cultivator accustomed to controlling his own destiny. Yet for now, Kai Jingshen could only endure it. If he refused, Kai Feng could drag the entire clan down a road from which there would be no return. Worse still, the consequences might even damage Kai Jingshen's own cultivation base. Compared with the possible ruin of his clan, surrendering some pride was a trivial price. Cai Jingshen was not submitting because he trusted Cui Dongshan. He was submitting because every alternative looked worse. Now that they had become temporary allies, Cai Jing decided to offer a token of sincerity.
Some time ago, someone attempted to assassinate you inside the academy. You survived because of a substitution talisman. Would you like to know who masterminded the attempt? Or perhaps you already believe that more than one person was involved.
Cui Dongshan turned only his eyes toward him. That sidelong glare instantly filled Cai Jingshen with unease. He had no idea which part of his offer had somehow annoyed this unpredictable man. Cui Dongshan stood and picked up the unopened flagon of wine from the table.
Back then I was so bored at the academy that I nearly climbed to the mountain summit and hanged myself. When someone finally tried to assassinate me, I was ecstatic. Something interesting had finally happened.
Didn't you see what I did afterward? I waited for them to try again, but they never came.
So I went all the way to Green Cloud Ferry Station, stuck out my neck, and practically begged someone to kill me. Yet not a single person dared to make another attempt. In the end, I had no choice but to haul several cartloads of bamboo from Green Cloud Ferry Station back to the academy for flooring. And I even paid the full price in lesser heat coins. Do you know why? Because I was grateful to those assassins for making my life slightly less boring.
I made extensive preparations for their second attempt. Unfortunately, I never got to put any of those plans into action. Still, coming up with them was far more entertaining than sitting around all day twiddling my thumbs.
For most people, surviving an assassination would create anger or fear. Cui Dongshan treated it like relief from boredom. That reaction was precisely why conventional threats were so ineffective against him. His enemies could not even rely on ordinary human instincts to predict his response. Cui Dongshan walked around the table and gave Cai Jingshen a friendly pat on the shoulder.
You're still too young, little Kai. You simply don't understand my personality yet. Give it time. Eventually Yao realized that I'm a very good ancestor. Any day now, the deceased ancestors of your Kai clan will probably visit you in a dream and tell you how grateful they are to me. When they do, just tell them they are welcome. Helping others has always brought me immense joy.
Cai Jingshen remained perfectly stoic, choosing to pretend that none of those words had ever entered his ears. Elsewhere, the Yellow Earth Bull had already retired to its so-called pen. Wei Xian remained at the same table as Cui Dongshan and Cai Jingshen, but throughout the exchange, the former founding emperor did little more than silently drink his wine. Later, Wei Xian followed Cui Dongshan back to his residence. Once both men were seated, Cui Dongshan summoned his golden flying sword and used it to erect a barrier around the room, sealing their conversation away from Cai Jingshen's ears. Cui Dongshan kicked off his boots, crossed his legs on the chair, and smiled.
Give me your assessment of Cai Jingshen.
Like countless people before him, he will ultimately perish because of his own greed.
To Wei Xian, Cai Jingshen simply did not matter enough in the greater scheme of things. Before the vast tide of national fortune, even the strength of a nascent tier Earth immortal was too limited to create a truly decisive impact. Prior to entering the provincial city, Cui Dongshan had already shown Wei Xian extensive intelligence concerning hidden affairs within the Great Sui nation. Against the secrets surrounding the Gao clan, Cai Jingshen's plans looked almost trivial. The Gao clan of the Great Sui nation had once managed to cooperate with the Lu Empire and delay the rise of the Great Li Empire for several decades. Such an achievement could not be explained merely by the Great Sui Emperor possessing exceptional foresight. The replica of white jade capital belonging to the Great Li Empire had been constructed by Mohist cultivators with assistance from the master naturalist of the Lu clan. At the same time, both the Great Sui nation and the Lu Empire had also received guidance from powerful cultivators belonging to the 100 schools of thought. This was no longer a contest decided by one emperor, one clan or one nascent tier cultivator, schools of thought, hidden experts, national fortune, and generations of preparation were all intertwined. The true battlefield stretched far beyond any visible court chamber. Cui Dongshan himself was a deeply concealed and relatively important pawn. Although he had acted timid and submissive tonight, seemingly surrendering his fate entirely into Cui Dongshan's hands, he was nowhere near as defenseless as his performance suggested. Even Cui Dongshan's decision to move his entire clan away from the capital, supposedly out of anger and humiliation, had most likely been made under the guidance of some powerful mastermind hidden behind the curtain. At present, the Great Li Empire and the Great Sui nation had established an alliance of the highest caliber. On the surface, both sides had gained greatly from it. The Great Sui nation no longer had to directly face the terrifying armies of Great Li. In exchange for surrendering relatively insignificant border nations such as the Yellow Court nation, Great Sui obtained more than a century of precious breathing room in which to rest, recover, and accumulate strength. The Great Li Empire, meanwhile, preserved its military strength and continued driving southward. Its expansion rolled across the continent until its forces reached the border of the luminous Vermilion Empire like an unstoppable iron tide. Yet beneath that seemingly harmonious alliance, neither the Song clan of Great Li nor the Gao clan of Great Sui had stopped calculating. Most importantly, although the Great Li Empire had kept the death of Emperor Song Zhengchun's secret, Great Sui had most likely already sensed that something was wrong. That hidden weakness was likely the reason the Great Sui nation had suddenly become so eager to act. The Great Li armies had already conquered half of the eastern treasured Vile continent and appeared invincible. But conquest and control were two very different things. Great Li's grasp on much of its newly acquired territory was still fragile. If Great Sui launched a coordinated resistance alongside Lakeview Academy and the luminous Vermilion Empire, the momentum of the entire continent could reverse almost instantly. Great Li could be forced to surrender all of the lands it had recently conquered. Worse still, even the Empire's original territory could fall under threat. One wrong turn, and an empire that appeared unstoppable today could tumble into an irreversible catastrophe tomorrow. That was the terrifying truth of imperial expansion. The farther Great Li advanced, the more territory it had to hold, and the greater the damage if its enemies found the right moment to strike. An empire could look strongest precisely when it had stretched itself closest to the breaking point. Wei Shan would not dare claim that Cui Dongshan was guaranteed to defeat every hidden figure pulling strings from the mountain summit. But Cui Dongshan? In Wei Shan's eyes, that man was not important enough to warrant serious concern, hence his judgment that Cui Dongshan would eventually be destroyed by his own greed. Cui Dongshan shook his head.
The Great Sui nation has only accepted the current arrangement because its ambitions for the future are extremely high.
Wei Shan's brows drew together.
Is the Great Sui nation truly planning to revoke the agreement? Could it be aiming to replace the Great Li Empire?
Instead of answering, Cui Dongshan burst into laughter and pointed directly at himself. Wei Shan froze for a moment, then comprehension dawned, and he cupped his fist in salute.
Your foresight truly has no equal imperial preceptor.
Call me Mr. Cui from now on. You were the founding emperor of the Southern Garden Nation. When you call me Imperial Preceptor, it sounds as though you're my superior.
The Southern Garden Nation is only comparable to a few counties of the Great Li Empire. I was fortunate enough to encounter otherworldly immortals, and only through their guidance did I send people to investigate the world outside our little realm. But if I had never personally entered the majestic world, I could never have imagined how vast this world truly is.
There is an extremely prestigious scholar on the Middle Earth divine continent. He once said that entire seas and continents are merely specks of dust when viewed against the true scale of existence. If the chance ever comes, I'll take you to meet him.
Then, as though the discussion of nations and worlds had suddenly ceased to matter, Cui Dongshan gripped both armrests and began swaying from side to side. The chair creaked beneath him as though he were riding a horse. The sight was absurdly comical. Wei Xian, however, had long since become accustomed to Cui Dongshan's bizarre habits. In fact, he had adjusted to them much faster than Yulu and Shishi. Perhaps that was because Wei Xian had once been an emperor, someone who had spent a lifetime judging wars, courts, and national fortunes was naturally better at ignoring eccentric mannerisms and focusing on what truly mattered.
Right now, Great Sui and Great Li are competing to see which side has more hidden firepower. Whatever decisions Kai Feng or Kai Jingshan make will not substantially affect the final outcome. And the reason I'm staying here in the provincial city, instead of returning to the academy in the capital, isn't nearly as complicated as you imagine. My teacher cherishes Li Baoping more than anyone. Mao Xiaodong is also a tremendous blabbermouth, so he'll definitely tell my teacher about this rather ugly scheme devised by Great Sui. If I went to the academy, now my teacher would certainly denounce me for involving myself in this mess.
The playful strategist who had spoken so casually about ministers, city gods, assassins, and national fortune now showed something far rarer, genuine apprehension.
If I tried discussing the greater good or the larger picture with my teacher, he would only dislike me even more. I might even lose the right to remain his student. But this is still something I have to do. I can't simply placate him by saying that Li Baoping Li Huai and the others will be fine. By now, my teacher has developed a relatively mature set of principles. He considers the order of one's original intentions, whether the final goal is good or bad, and all the choices made between those 2 points. Compared with him, I am far colder and far more willing to use expedient methods. Our philosophies simply won't agree.
Here lay one of Cui Dongshan's deepest contradictions. He could calculate the survival of an empire with terrifying ruthlessness, yet the judgment he feared most was not that of emperors or immortals. It was his teachers. To Cui Dongshan, being proven strategically wrong was one thing. Being regarded as morally beyond redemption was far worse.
So it's better for me to hide here for now and do a few things to compensate for my transgressions. Once that's finished, I'll return to the academy and accept whatever punishment awaits me. Hopefully the worst outcome is that my teacher gives me a beating. At least that would be better than him completely losing hope in me. If that happens, then I'm truly finished. If he decides that I'm beyond saving, even the old scholar might not be able to persuade him to keep me.
Wei Xian considered those words carefully. Just as he prepared to respond, Cui Dongshan cut him off. By then, Cui Dongshan had somehow shuffled his chair all the way to the window. With his back turned to Wei Xian, he casually waved one hand.
For now, you have no right to comment on the disputes between my teacher and me, so keep your mouth shut.
A faint sigh escaped him.
Wu Yuan of Dragon Spring Prefecture, Wei Li of the Yellow Court Nation, Lu Qingfeng of the Azure Phoenix Nation Chief Military Governor Wei Liang, and you.
All of you are bright prospects in my eyes. Among that group, you and Wei Liang possess the highest starting points, though what each of you will eventually accomplish remains to be seen. There's no need to discuss Wei Liang too much. He's a complete nomad, so he can hardly be considered a pawn. Wu Yuan and Liu Qingfeng were carefully cultivated by him. You and Wei Li were chosen by me. In the future, the 4 of you will have to fight on our behalf.
Wei Xian did not fully understand the significance of those words, but he committed every name and every detail to memory. Those names sounded almost casual now, yet Cui Dongshan was clearly looking years, or perhaps decades, into the future. When a strategist begins selecting people before the next great struggle has even taken shape, every seemingly minor figure becomes worth remembering. Then, without warning, Cui Dongshan slapped the armrest of his chair.
Even now, that idiot Shiru probably still doesn't realize that the message I left for her in that brocade pouch came straight from my heart. I poured my heart and soul into that message. I was trying to pass on some of the most valuable experience I possess.
If I get back to the academy and discover that she hasn't improved at all, I'm going to give her a good boot up the backside.
With that extraordinary shift from continental politics to Shiru's progress, the private conversation came to an end. Wei Xian took his leave, Cui Dongshan swept his sleeve, and the barrier formed by the golden flying sword silently dispersed. As Wei Xian departed, his admiration for Cui Dongshan was genuine, and so was his reverence. He admired Cui Dongshan for transforming the great Li Empire from a tiny subsidiary nation of the Lu Empire into the colossal power it had become, all within little more than a century. But that accomplishment alone was not enough to inspire true veneration in a former emperor like Wei Xian. What impressed him most was something even rarer. Even while Cui Dongshan was still building the empire, he had already begun painstakingly considering how that future empire would someday be defended. Winning a kingdom requires brilliance. Building mechanisms to preserve that kingdom before victory is even complete requires a different level of foresight. In Wei Xian's eyes, that was the quality that separated Cui Dongshan from ordinary conquerors and talented ministers. After Wei Xian was gone, the residence fell quiet. Cui Dongshan flicked his wrist. The wine flagon resting on the table flew smoothly into his grasp, and he began drinking in small, unhurried sips. Across his life, he had experienced too much and witnessed too much. He had read countless books and looked upon just as many breathtaking landscapes. Yet among all those memories, one seemingly insignificant voice had never left him. During the riveting battle between Third and Fourth, an utterly ordinary scholarly official had spoken a few words. Perhaps almost everyone present had ignored them. But those words had struck Cui Chan deeply, and even now he remembered them clearly.
Heaven and earth bestowed life upon us, and where there is life there must eventually be death. Plants flourish, then wither. Such is the law of heaven.
Yet you Kai refiners who call yourselves immortals defy that law and look upon ordinary mortals as though they were nothing more than ants. Tell me, how are you any different from the barbaric demons that you yourselves despise?
For a man who could move nations like pieces across a board, it was remarkable that the words haunting him were not spoken by an emperor, a saint, or some unrivaled immortal. They came from an insignificant mortal official questioning the arrogance of cultivators themselves. Perhaps that was precisely why Cui Chan remembered them. Power could determine who won the struggle before him, but those words challenged whether possessing power gave anyone the right to decide how lesser lives should be treated. And for someone walking Cui Dongshan's cold, expedient path, that question was far more dangerous than any assassin's blade. Night had settled over the capital of the Great Sui nation, yet within the Kai clan's manor, the lamps still burned brightly. Behind closed doors, a gathering of young officials was taking place, quiet on the surface, but dangerous enough to alter the fate of a nation. Kai Feng had secured second place in the recent imperial examination, and was already regarded as one of the brightest rising stars of the court, yet among the 7 or 8 men seated here tonight, his official rank was the lowest. Around him sat left-hand Minister Guo Xin of the Ministry of Rights, right-hand Minister Tao Ju of the Ministry of War, General Miao Ren, a descendant of one of the Great Sui nation's founding generals, and Vice Commander Song Shan of the Infantry Commander's Office. Every one of them was a figure with influence, ambition, and a future that stretched far beyond the walls of this manor. They were remarkably young for men who already stood so close to the heart of imperial power. Even Tao Ju, the oldest among them, was only 45. Kai Feng himself was tall, handsome, and dignified. Surrounded by ministers and military commanders, he showed no trace of unease. His confidence came from two foundations: his own scholarly accomplishments and the enormous shadow cast by the Kai clan behind him. The clan's old ancestor, Kai Jingshen, might have become an object of ridicule in recent years, but ridicule could not erase cultivation. He remained a nascent-tier Earth immortal who had defended the capital for many years. In the martial world and in the imperial court alike, a declining reputation did not mean declining power. A nascent-tier cultivator was still a mountain that ordinary men could not move. Tea and wine rested on the tables. The official matters had already been discussed, the arguments exhausted, the positions revealed. What remained was no longer ordinary court politics. The decision reached in this room could influence the future of the Great Sui nation, and perhaps even the entire eastern treasured vile continent. 5 days remained until the Emperor's Thousand Elders Banquet. In their eyes, there would never be a better moment to strike. Kai Feng abruptly rose from his seat. The young scholar's eyes burned with conviction.
I studied with all my strength so that one day I could ensure that our nation and its people would never be oppressed by outside powers. If there has ever been a moment for scholars to stand forward and prepare to sacrifice themselves for the greater good, then that moment is now.
The newly crowned Zhuangyuan of the Imperial Examination was also present. He sprang to his feet, raised his cup, and hurled it against the floor. Porcelain shattered across the hall like the opening crack of battle.
A son cannot have a second father, just as a subordinate cannot serve a second master. Death must come before dishonor. Never forget that most of the 36 founding officials of our Great Sui nation were Confucian scholars.
The atmosphere erupted. Blood surged, breaths grew heavy, and the careful restraint of court officials gave way to the fervor of men who believed history itself was demanding an answer from them.
Death to Mao Xiaodong.
Another official's eyes were filled with tears. He slammed his palm onto the armrest hard enough to make the wood tremble.
How could the Great Sui nation bow its head to the savage Song clan? We conceded without even fighting. This is humiliation.
These men did not see themselves as traitors. That was precisely what made the situation so dangerous. In their hearts, rebellion against imperial policy had become loyalty to the nation itself. Once conviction reaches that point, reason can easily be consumed by righteousness. Not long afterward, the gathering dispersed. Kai Feng did not personally escort anyone from the manor. Such courtesy would only draw unwanted eyes. Song Shan had already arranged for the night patrols around the Kai residence to be replaced with his most trusted subordinates. Even so, no one wished to take unnecessary risks. Tonight's conversation was the kind that could send heads rolling if even a whisper escaped. When the final guest vanished into the darkness, Kai Feng remained alone in the guest hall. The fervor in his eyes had not faded. If the Great Sui nation truly stood at a crossroads, then he believed he must be one of those who stepped forward. To Kai Feng, this was not merely a political gamble. It was his chance to transform years of scholarship, family expectations, and youthful ambition into something that would be remembered by history. Whether history would call it courage or catastrophe had yet to be decided. Miao Ren and the newly crowned Zhuangyuan departed together in the same carriage. As the wheels rolled through the sleeping capital, the two men sat facing one another beneath the dim interior lantern. A faint, self-mocking expression crossed Miao Ren's face. He was many years older, yet the young Zhuangyuan sitting opposite him was far more composed. Perhaps that calm was exactly why the young man was already said to possess the makings of a future prime minister. Together with Li Changying of Mountain Cliff Academy, Chu Tong of Phoebe Creek, and Kai Feng. He belonged to the group known throughout the capital as the Four Spirits, the finest prospects of the younger generation. Beyond them stood the Four Stars, among whom was Pan Yuanchun, son of the deceased General Pan Maogen. All Four Stars were descendants of military families, and after the youngest, Pan Yuanchun, left the academy to serve at the border, all four had officially become men of the army. Among the combined Four Spirits and Four Stars, half were born into privilege, such as Chu Tong and Pan Yuanchun. The others, including Zhang Dai and Li Changying, had climbed upward through their own effort. Miao Ren knew that no fewer than 3 of these brilliant young men had already been drawn into the conspiracy. To him, it felt as if the heroic spirits of the Great Sui nation's founders would surely stand behind them. He lifted the carriage curtain and looked outside. The capital was deep in darkness. It was late at night, yet dawn remained very far away. And perhaps that was the most fitting image of the Great Sui nation itself. Men were already moving in the darkness, convinced that they were marching toward dawn, but none of them yet knew what kind of morning their actions would bring. Elsewhere, Chen Ping'an was making his way back while still pondering what Lin Shouyi had told him. He searched through his memories again and again, but no matter how he considered the matter, he could not understand what he had ever done to deserve such gratitude from Lin Shouyi. Had little Baoping or Li Huai said that they missed him greatly, Chen Ping'an would not have found it strange. They were still young, and their feelings had always been direct. Lin Shouyi, however, was different. Perhaps because of his sensitive background, he had always possessed keen attention to detail and remarkable mental fortitude. His ambitions were also lofty, so Chen Ping'an had never been surprised that Lin Shouyi entered the path of cultivation so early during his studies. Julian's instincts were as sharp as ever. Rather than return directly to his own guest room, he followed Chen Ping'an inside.
Is something wrong?
They had survived several life-and-death battles together. By now, much could be understood without explanation. Chen Ping'an did not hide anything from him. He poured 2 bowls of wine and nodded.
Mountain Master Mao told me that some people in the Great Sui capital are preparing to target the Academy's students. They intend to take advantage of the Thousand Elders Banquet. Envoys from the Great Li Empire will be attending. If something happens at the Academy during that time, those behind the plot can use it to drive the Great Sui and Great Li against one another. The fragile peace between the two nations could collapse, and that could very easily become a full-scale war. Many officials in the Great Sui are already deeply dissatisfied with the Emperor's policy of appeasement. Countless scholars across the nation are furious as well, and ordinary citizens cannot understand why their country is bowing to the Great Li Empire. Everything is already prepared. All that remains is a spark.
That was the terrifying elegance of the scheme. The conspirators did not need to defeat an army. They only needed to create one sufficiently bloody incident at exactly the right moment, and allow accumulated resentment to do the rest. Julian slowly considered the implications.
If that happens, the Great Sui nation's hand will be forced. The Emperor would have no choice but to abandon the alliance.
Normally, I wouldn't involve myself in political affairs. I dislike people deliberately creating conflict, but I can understand that these officials believe they are acting for their nation. From their point of view, their intentions aren't necessarily despicable.
Chen Ping'an paused, his gaze lowered toward the wine.
But their plan is going to involve Li Baoping and the others.
He emptied the entire bowl in one swallow. In that instant, Julian felt something chilling rise from the young man across from him. Killing intent, dense, restrained, and unmistakable. Chen Ping'an could tolerate political ambition when it remained among politicians, but the moment that ambition reached toward the children entrusted to him, the matter ceased to be distant affairs of state. It became personal, and anyone familiar with Chen Ping'an knew that this was a line far more dangerous to cross than offending his pride. Julian opened his mouth, intending to speak, but eventually remained silent. Chen Ping'an poured himself another bowl.
I know what kind of condition I'm in. I've always been timid about certain things. I'm afraid to indulge my own impulses. But after nearly dying against Du Mao, and then encountering Li Baoping, it became increasingly clear that something has gone wrong with my state of mind.
It may even go all the way back to when my bonded porcelain was broken. Whatever the origin, it's become a troublesome problem.
Julian's expression grew serious.
What do you intend to do, young master? This sounds like one of those knots of the heart that cultivators call internal demons.
Chen Ping'an smiled and raised his bowl toward Julian.
I just need to read more books.
Julian stared at him in disbelief.
I am not joking.
Julian took a sip of wine and shook his head. If this was not a joke, then surely there were no jokes left beneath the heavens.
Even before reaching the academy, I had already started reading deeply into books containing the teachings of sages. Why do you think I studied legalist texts while we were in the Azure Phoenix Nation? It was because I discovered that Confucian texts alone couldn't illuminate certain ideas in my mind. I could feel those ideas, but I couldn't identify them clearly or put them into words. Cui Dongshan suggested that I compare Confucian teachings with the fundamental principles of legalism. Looking back now, that was worthwhile. Only after arriving at the academy and seeing the inscriptions on the ruler hanging from Mountain Master Mao's waist did I suddenly understand that I had been walking in the right direction.
For Chen Ping'an, reading was no longer simply the accumulation of knowledge. He was using different schools of thought like whetstones, grinding away at confusion until the principles in his heart gained clear edges. For a cultivator threatened by internal demons, that clarity could be more valuable than another treasure or technique.
Before this, I was moving forward almost entirely by instinct. I didn't know where the road led, and the state of mind I fear most is.
He fell silent, searching for the right words.
Having no aim and no direction.
Something like that. As long as I can see someone standing somewhere far away or somewhere high above, I feel reassured. It doesn't matter how distant that place is. If I can see something worth walking toward, then I know where to place my next step.
A wise sage once said that one should follow the heart without overstepping the proper boundaries. If I can do that, then perhaps everything can be put right.
Julian held his wine bowl halfway to his lips. Drinking suddenly seemed inappropriate. Not drinking seemed equally strange.
Who needs a reason to drink?
The bowls were emptied together. For pure martial artists, battles between life and death were among the finest catalysts for breaking through cultivation bottlenecks. Chen Ping'an was now also a qi refiner. So why could refinement of the heart not become his battlefield? If the body of a martial artist could be tempered through fists and blood, then perhaps a cultivator's mind could be tempered through doubt, knowledge, and self-examination. Like a sword repeatedly sharpened against a slab of dragon-slaying platform, Chen Ping'an was beginning to treat his own weakness as material for cultivation, rather than something merely to fear. There were limits, however, to how well cultivators of different paths could understand one another. Back on Central Mountain in the sky-holding nation, Julian had once thrown a punch at Pei Qian aboard the immortal ship, only for her to evade it instinctively. Shiru was not a pure martial artist, so she could not understand what was so remarkable about Pei Qian's instinctive evasion. In the same way, Julian was not a qi refiner. He could not fully appreciate the terror that internal demons inspired in cultivators, nor could he see the heights Chen Ping'an was trying to reach. After another round of wine, Julian recalled something Shiro had told him.
Shiru said you nearly fought Li Baoping on top of the wall at the Lion Garden. She was standing behind you and saw that the instant you grabbed the hilt of your longsword, your palm was burned. You even hid your hand inside your sleeve so Li Baoping wouldn't notice. Is that true?
It is. Pseudo-celestial weapons can be rather difficult to please.
Julian looked puzzled, so Chen Ping'an explained further.
The lasting Kai sword I told you about is actually of a higher grade, but most of its restrictions had already been removed by that old sword Immortal. Otherwise, I would never have been able to draw it. The sword Immortal sword that the Fu clan gave me as compensation is different. On one hand, they deliberately put me in an awkward position by giving me a pseudo-celestial weapon that I can't properly use anytime soon. On the other hand, they can still claim they acted for my benefit.
They could have removed every restriction before handing it over, but that would be like giving me a courtyard with no lock on the gate. I could use it freely. But if someone stole it, that person could also turn it against me.
Chen Ping'an reached out with one hand. Sword Immortal flew into his grasp.
I've been using basic refinement methods to peel away its restrictions, but the progress is painfully slow. I'll probably need to become a 7th-tier martial artist before I can completely unravel them and wield this sword as I please. For now it's a double-edged sword. Using it harms me nearly as much as it harms the enemy, so I'll only draw it when there's no other choice.
A pseudo-celestial weapon was therefore not simply a stronger blade. Without sufficient cultivation and refinement, its restrictions could make ownership itself a burden. Chen Ping'an possessed tremendous killing power in his hand, but that power still demanded a price every time he tried to borrow it. Understanding dawned in Julian's eyes. He took another generous swallow of wine before returning to the threat hanging over the academy.
Li Baoping, Li Huai, Lin Xiaodi Yulu, and Zai Zai all came from the Great Li Empire. There's little value in assassinating Yulu. Zai Zai has already revealed that she was once a citizen of the Lu Empire and a cultivation prodigy from its foremost immortal manor. But precisely because of that background, killing her would not create the effect the conspirators want. Li Baoping, Li Huai, and Lin Xiaodi are different. All three came from the Jewel's small world and were personally taught by Mr. Cui. Of those three, little Baoping and Li Huai are especially important. The patriarch of Baoping's clan is a nascent tier-guest elder of the Great Li Empire, while Li Huai's father is an N-tier master martial artist. If either child is harmed, the Great Li Empire will almost certainly turn against the Great Sui nation.
Julian's conclusion was cold, but strategically sound. The conspirators did not need the most famous victim. They needed the victim whose death would create the greatest political explosion. Little Baoping and Li Huai were frighteningly suitable targets. Chen Ping'an refilled Julian's bowl and gave him an amused smile.
It feels like you haven't enjoyed a single peaceful day since you started traveling with me.
Julian took a huge swallow and wiped his mouth with the back of his hand.
You wouldn't say that if you had entered the lotus flower-blessed land earlier and seen me in my prime. My life back then was even more chaotic and dangerous than it is now.
I only defeated Ding Ying in the lotus flower-blessed land because he underestimated me. If I had met someone as ruthless as you, I might have been the one to die.
Julian immediately drained his bowl and shamelessly extended it again.
Then a ruthless barbarian like me clearly deserves punishment. Another bowl should do.
Chen Ping'an obliged. Wine flowed once more.
I hope that during the next 10 years or even the next 100, you and I will still often have chances to sit down, drink, and talk like this.
As long as there's wine, I am always interested.
After speaking of assassination, war, internal demons, and deadly weapons, that simple wish carried unusual weight. In a world where cultivators could live for centuries yet die in a single miscalculated encounter, sharing another bowl 10 years later was already a kind of blessing. That night, Chen Ping'an drank far more than usual. After he and Julian separated, Chen Ping'an went to Mao Xiaodong's study. His next bonded item refinement was an extremely important matter, one that could not be decided casually. the two of them needed to discuss it in depth. Meanwhile, an entirely different battle was unfolding inside Li Baoping's dormitory room. Pei Qian looked slightly embarrassed.
Big Sister Baoping, I should warn you I'm a little restless when I sleep.
Li Baoping considered this seriously. Then she picked up a small mountain of copied texts that had occupied an entire bed and calmly moved it onto another small mountain of transcriptions. The two girls climbed into their respective beds.
Time to sleep.
Almost immediately, Li Baoping was asleep. Pei Qian, on the other hand, tossed and turned for a long time before finally drifting off deep into the night. When Pei Qian woke the next morning, she discovered that she had somehow wrapped herself tightly inside the blankets until she resembled a little zongzi. She glanced toward Li Baoping's bed. The blankets there had already been folded with absurd precision, forming a neat block that looked as though it had been cut into shape with a blade. For a brief moment, Pei Qian felt guilty when she remembered the mess she normally left behind. Then the guilt disappeared almost as quickly as it had arrived. She began nodding off again. After all, she needed a good sleep if she wanted enough energy to continue fooling Li Huai and his two friends, whom she considered even less clever than Li Huai himself. As for competing with Li Baoping, Pei Qian decided there was no need to rush. Losing to Li Baoping was hardly shameful when Li Baoping was older. Next year, Pei Qian would be 12, while Li Baoping would be 13. That still left a 1-year difference, but Pei Qian saw no problem. There was always another year after that, and another after that. Eventually, surely, she would catch up. The logic was questionable, but the determination was flawless. In Pei Qian's little world, even age itself seemed like an opponent that could eventually be defeated through persistence. Li Baoping had already moved on to more urgent matters. The moment she woke, she rushed straight toward Chen Ping'an's guest room. He was not there. Without hesitation, she hurried to Mao Xiaodong's courtyard instead and waited outside the entrance. As the Confucian sage presiding over the academy, Mao Xiaodong could perceive everything taking place within its grounds. He naturally knew Li Baoping was waiting and informed Chen Ping'an. Chen Ping'an left the study to collect her. While walking back, he explained that he would not have time to tour the capital with her that day. Li Baoping learned that Chen Ping'an intended to remain at the academy for at least a month. Since there would be plenty of time later, she immediately abandoned the idea of touring the capital that day and began thinking of other places she had not visited. Chen Ping'an suggested that she take Pei Qian around the academy instead, to the scripture library and the other notable sites of Eastern Splendor Mountain. Li Baoping immediately decided this was an excellent idea. Before the two of them even reached Mao Xiaodong's study, she darted away, saying that she would first go eat breakfast with Pei Qian. Chen Ping'an watched her disappear before returning to the study. Mao Xiaodong smiled knowingly.
Quite the predicament, isn't it? You were worried that someone might attempt to assassinate Li Baoping if you take her outside the academy, but you also don't want to disappoint her.
Chen Ping'an nodded.
Guarantee you going to ask whether I know which prominent figures of the Great Sui nation are behind this plot?
Chen Ping'an shook his head.
We may be inside the academy, but this is still territory belonging to the Great Sui nation.
That answer revealed Chen Ping'an's restraint. He wanted to protect the children, but he had no desire to turn himself into a judge of the Great Sui court. Until the plot crossed the academy's threshold, he understood that there were boundaries he should not casually overstep. Mao Xiaodong waved the subject aside.
Forget those matters for now. Your bonded item refinement is the priority.
Buddhist teachings say that if one can discard worldly attachments, then adversity and suffering will no longer appear as adversity and suffering. In that way one may attain a state of perpetual bliss.
Daoists similarly seek peace and tranquility. They may regard hardship as a vessel capable of carrying one away from the mortal world toward transcendent freedom. Confucians are different. We believe in facing adversity and suffering directly. We struggle upstream against the current of hardship, while the teachings left behind by sages serve as lamps along the riverbank, showing us where to place our feet.
3 traditions, 3 responses to suffering. Buddhism sought release from fixation. Taoism sought transcendence and tranquility. Confucianism demanded that one remain within the storm and continue walking against it. For Chen Ping'an, who had spent his life refusing to abandon difficult roads simply because they were difficult, the third path resonated with particular force. Chen Ping'an contemplated Mao Xiaodong's words before voicing the principle that had emerged in his heart.
Even if the entire world stands against you, you must still strive toward what you believe is right.
Mao Xiaodong gave an earnest nod.
Exactly right.
Outside the academy, men were preparing to gamble with nations in the name of righteousness. Inside the academy, Chen Ping'an was learning how to define righteousness within his own heart. The coming conflict would not merely test swords, cultivation realms, or political schemes. It would test whether conviction could remain principled once blood began to fall. In less than 4 hours, Li Baoping had already led Pei Qian across virtually every corner of the academy. Had she not stopped along the way to explain the halls, courtyards, paths, and landmarks they passed, the energetic girl in red could probably have finished the entire tour in half that time. Their final destination was the enormous tree standing atop Eastern Splendor Mountain. One after another, the 2 girls climbed its ancient trunk and settled upon the same broad branch, where the academy and distant capital unfolded beneath them like a painted scroll. From that lofty perch, Li Baoping pointed toward the capital and confidently identified the restaurants with the finest food, the liveliest places to visit, and all manner of interesting corners hidden among the streets. She spoke with such familiarity that one might have thought the entire capital was merely an extension of her own backyard. Pei Qian secretly glanced at her. In that instant, she could almost picture Li Baoping sitting upon this very branch alone, staring into the distance and waiting eagerly for the day her junior uncle would finally arrive. The 2 sat side by side. Li Baoping took out a red handkerchief, carefully unfolded it, and revealed 2 soft pastries tucked within, one for herself and one for Pei Qian. Pei Qian explained that she wanted to wander around on her own that afternoon. Li Baoping readily agreed, then mentioned that a highly respected elderly scholar from the distant south would be visiting the academy to give a lesson. His reputation for interpreting a certain Confucian classic had already spread far and wide. Since Chen Ping'an was occupied and could not accompany her through the capital, Li Baoping had decided to attend the lecture instead. She wanted to hear for herself whether this celebrated scholar truly possessed the learning everyone claimed. Pei Qian did not even know what exegesis meant. Her confidence immediately shrank before such lofty scholarly matters.
Will you be able to understand him, big Sister Baoping?
Li Baoping first nodded, then shook her head. For once, even this quick-minded girl seemed troubled by the limits of what she knew.
Even though I've already made so many transcriptions, there are still many things in those books that I don't understand. The academy teachers keep telling me not to bite off more than I can chew. They say that even if they answer my questions, I won't understand their answers anyway. But if they refuse to answer me, how can they possibly know whether I'll understand? They are my teachers, so I can't argue with them, and I've had to keep all those questions bottled up. Some teachers do try to explain things, but they keep circling around the issue and answering a dozen questions that I never even asked. None of them are like Mr. Cui. He always answered my questions directly. Junior uncle is the same. If he knows, he answers. If he doesn't know, he simply tells me that he doesn't know. That's why I like leaving the academy to explore. The earliest mountain master here was Mr. Cui. He used to teach me Li Huai and Lin Shaoyi, and he told us that knowledge only becomes useful when we put it into practice. He encouraged us to see more of the world, then use what we've learned to help ourselves help others and help the world. I'm still too young to do very much, so for now all I can do is travel to more places and see as much as possible.
Those words reveal why Li Baoping's curiosity is so important. To her, learning is not a collection of elegant sentences trapped between book covers. Mr. Qi taught her that knowledge must eventually walk out through the academy gates and meet the living world. Her frustration is not arrogance. It is the impatience of someone who genuinely wants understanding rather than empty authority. Pei Qian noticed the rare frown on Li Baoping's face. She had rarely seen this bright red figure burdened by so many tangled thoughts. Li Baoping turned toward her, smiled, and patted Pei Qian's shoulder. Li Baoping turned toward her, smiled, and patted Pei Qian's shoulder.
My junior uncle thinks about far more than I do.
She began swinging her feet beneath the branch, but her expression remained unexpectedly serious.
Cui Dongshan once told me that someday junior uncle will meet the woman he loves the most. When that happens, he'll only be second in his heart. He also said that maybe someday he'll meet someone I like more than junior uncle, and then he'll only be second in my heart. I think that's complete nonsense. I wouldn't mind if junior uncle found someone more important to him than me, but there's no way he'll ever find someone I admire and cherish more than him. Isn't that right, Pei Qian?
Pei Qian nodded so quickly that there was no room for hesitation. Satisfied, Li Baoping patted her shoulder again, this time with the solemn air of an elder sister passing down some important rule of the martial world.
When you travel the world with junior uncle, in the future you have to become more mature. It's fine to be naughty once in a while, but don't keep making trouble for him. Someone as good as my junior uncle doesn't just come falling out of the sky. He has worries and burdens of his own, so you should help carry as much of that burden as you can. Can you do that? Back when I traveled with junior uncle, he never drank. Now he drinks, so you must be causing him so much trouble that he has to drown his sorrows, right?
Pei Qian nodded earnestly once again, accepting the accusation with remarkable obedience. There is something quietly moving in Li Baoping's warning. She sees Chen Ping'an not as an invincible martial artist or distant hero, but as a person whose shoulders can grow tired. To her, caring for someone means noticing the weight they carry and helping before they ever need to ask. Soon afterward, the two girls climbed down from the enormous tree. Li Baoping needed to attend the visiting scholar's lesson, so she hurried away without delay. She was unquestionably the youngest figure among the academy's teachers and students, and as she darted between buildings in her vivid red clothes, she resembled a streak of scarlet light flashing through solemn halls. Wherever she went, eyes naturally followed. Pei Qian, meanwhile, headed toward Li Huai's dormitory. She arrived just as Li Huai and his two companions returned from their lesson. As usual, the trio were together.
Malian, if someone in your family becomes an official and receives an imperial edict, are there really that many rules just for placing the edict like Pei Qian said?
Malian nodded vigorously.
She got a few minor details wrong, but overall, it really is roughly the way she described. And that alcove bed she claims she used to sleep on, can one really fit all the things she talked about inside?
My big sister has one. It really is that big.
Liu Guan's expression immediately became resigned. Piece by piece, Pei Qian's extravagant claims seemed to be transforming into evidence.
Then that settles it. She really is a princess. What are we supposed to do the next time we see her? Is bowing enough? Surely she can't expect us to kneel and kowtow.
His Majesty and Her Highness once visited my home, but I was too young back then. I don't remember what formalities everyone used.
Li Huai, in contrast, looked entirely untroubled.
So what if she is a princess? She is still Chen Ping'an's disciple. When we see her, just follow my lead. Cup your fists and greet her as an equal.
That's a good idea. She said she belongs to the cultivation world, so well just treat her as someone from the cultivation world.
Not long afterward, they encountered Pei Qian at the entrance to the dormitory. True to their plan, all three immediately cupped their fists in a martial salute. Pei Qian raised an eyebrow. Without missing a beat, She returned the salute with equal solemnity. Once all four were inside the dormitory, Pei Qian wasted no time. She launched directly into the tale of a dangerous conflict from her travels. According to her dramatic account, dozens of burly bandits had suddenly erupted from thick undergrowth on both sides of a road. Blades, spears, and clubs flashed everywhere, while their leader strode forward carrying an enormous axe.
I was the one who constructed this road, so if you want safe passage, you'll have to pay for it.
Pei Qian paused her tale and asked whether the three boys would have been afraid in such a situation. Ma Lian immediately admitted that he would.
What's there to fear? There's no way a bunch of bandits could be a match for your master.
Pei Qian crossed her arms and rolled her eyes. Clearly, Liu Guan was ruining the atmosphere she had worked so hard to build.
My master asked what would happen if he refused to pay. I can't even describe how heroic he looked at that moment. He didn't move at all, yet it felt as though he could take the bandit leader's head whenever he wished. Even with all those fierce bandits surrounding him, his expression practically said, "Lay down your weapons now. My patience has its limit."
Pei Qian was secretly delighted with herself. The war stories and cultivation novels she had read were finally proving useful. Every gesture became sharper, every danger greater, and every sentence grander than the last.
We've already heard countless stories about how powerful your master is. We know he's a great martial artist with incredible fist technique and an almighty sword immortal. Just tell us what happened. Did he slaughter all the bandits in some epic battle?
Pei Qian glared at him.
The cultivation world isn't filled with barbarians who only know how to fight and kill, no matter their status or cultivation base. Everyone in the cultivation world is still a living, breathing person. They were not idiots.
Liu Guan immediately fell silent. Ironically, beneath all of Pei Qian's exaggeration lies a lesson she has genuinely absorbed from Chen Ping'an. The Jianghu is not a stage populated by disposable villains. Cultivation may divide people by strength, but strength does not erase humanity, intelligence, fear, dignity, or consequence. Pei Qian leaped down from her stool and moved to one side of the room, transforming the cramped dormitory into her imaginary battlefield.
The bandit leader became furious. He raised his giant axe almost 40 kilograms in weight and shouted at my master, "Do you have a death wish, kid? If you don't want to live anymore, I'll gladly send you on your way."
She rushed several steps across the room, spun around and took up Chen Ping'an's role.
Come.
In Pei Qian's telling, that one word ignited the entire mob. The bandits erupted into a bloodthirsty frenzy. Liu Guan and Ma Lian were completely drawn in. Li Huai, however, simply sat there cracking sunflower seeds as though listening to a story about light rain. He had already endured genuine dangers alongside Chen Ping'an. Even the terrifying female ghost in the red wedding dress had failed to overcome him. Compared with such experiences, several dozen roadside bandits were hardly enough to make Li Huai's heart tremble. Pei Qian darted back across the room, put on her fiercest expression, and once again became the bandit leader.
"Do you understand what you're saying, kid?"
Then she jogged back to the opposite side.
"I do."
Pei Qian raised a finger and swept it through the air, tracing the character for death with theatrical precision.
"That's the gesture I made at the time. What do you think?"
Ma Lian stared blankly, apparently overwhelmed by the magnificence of her supposed courage. Liu Guan, meanwhile, applauded enthusiastically. Pei Qian strutted toward the table, calmly drank from the tea Ma Lian had prepared, then resumed her tale as though a master storyteller, merely pausing between chapters.
The bandits were enraged. They pounded their chests and stamped their feet like soldiers beating war drums across a battlefield. Their leader roared so loudly that his eyes looked as wide as saucers. He shouted, "Brothers, raise your weapons and cut down these two arrogant bastards. But be especially careful of that little girl with the sword and saber at her waist. She may be young, but she is wise beyond her years and possesses an unfathomable cultivation base. She must not be underestimated."
Her voice died instantly. A large warm hand had settled upon the top of her head. Pei Qian slowly turned around. The mighty young heroine of her story vanished at once, replaced by a disciple wearing an unmistakably guilty smile.
Greetings, Master. I was just.
She was prepared to confess that she had been spinning an outrageous tale for Li Huai and his companions, But Chen Ping'an interrupted with a smile rather than a reprimand.
Li Huai and his friends are still academy students, so don't tell them too many stories about the cultivation world. In the future, when Li Huai, Liu Guan, and Ma Lion leave on educational excursions, you can accompany them and tell them more stories then.
Pei Qian immediately nodded with great enthusiasm. Chen Ping'an told Li Huai and the others to go eat, adding that they could visit his guest room later. Then he took Pei Qian with him to search for Li Baoping. As master and disciple walked through the academy, Chen Ping'an's tone gradually became serious.
If the opportunity comes, you may travel on an educational excursion with Li Huai and his friends. But if that day really arrives, you must tell them the truth about your martial arts cultivation base and your past experiences. Don't keep boasting and make them believe the cultivation world is somewhere they can do whatever they please. If they enter the Jianghu with that misunderstanding, something could very easily go wrong. Do you understand?
I do.
Make sure you take this seriously.
I'll engrave everything you just said onto a bamboo slip later.
Chen Ping'an is not merely correcting a child's habit of bragging, he is guarding against something far more dangerous, false confidence. In the cultivation world, misunderstanding one's own strength can cost a life. But misunderstanding the nature of the entire Jianghu can endanger everyone traveling beside you. Experience without humility becomes recklessness. They continued along a quiet path within the academy. Trees whispered softly beside them, and the noise of distant halls seemed to recede. Perhaps because of that peaceful atmosphere, several thoughts suddenly surfaced in Chen Ping'an's heart.
We explore the world for more than beautiful scenery, just as we practice martial arts for more than becoming stronger. We should also search for people who are better than ourselves.
Then, one by one, Chen Ping'an recalled the people he had encountered across his travels. Zhang Shanfeng, who had once gone hungry aboard the Ceremony Mountain immortal ship, Shu Yuanxia, who had courageously entered that ghostly manor, the old sword saint of Water Combing Nation, and the ghostly couple who looked terrifying but proved to be honorable and deeply devoted to one another. There was also Fan of Old Dragon City and Liu Yuzhou of Ape Havoc Estate on Stalactite Mountain. Different people, different paths, different strengths, yet each had left something behind in Chen Ping'an's heart.
Whenever I meet people like them, I sometimes feel ashamed of myself. Sometimes I admire them. Occasionally I even envy them.
Pei Qian looked at him in genuine surprise. The master who seemed so dependable in her eyes had just admitted to feelings she had never imagined he possessed.
You feel those emotions too, Master.
Chen Ping'an gently patted her head.
I am no different from everyone else. I have emotions and desires. I also have plenty of bad habits and flaws. There are many people who dislike me or look down on me. But you shouldn't search for people better than yourself merely for the sake of finding them. You should treat them as markers showing you where you might aim. Even if you can never reach the heights where they stand, you should at least keep striving toward those heights.
This may be one of the clearest expressions of Chen Ping'an's martial path. Strength is not the destination. Travel is not the destination. Even cultivation itself is not the destination. Every encounter becomes a mirror. One person reveals courage, another integrity, another kindness, another a height of character that exposes one's own shortcomings. The true journey is the endless effort to become a better person without pretending perfection has already been reached. Pei Qian's footsteps gradually slowed. Chen Ping'an continued several paces before realizing that the girl behind him had stopped completely. He turned around and looked back at her with a smile.
What is wrong?
Pei Qian smiled.
Big Sister Baoping told me that someone as good as you Dosan tea simply fall out of the sky. But when I first met you, it really did feel as though you had suddenly fallen out of the sky.
Chen Ping'an smiled.
Go tell Baoping that, if you dare.
I wouldn't do that. I am not an idiot.
She hurried forward to catch up with him. Yet only moments earlier, while gazing at her master's back, Pei Qian had felt an inexplicable trace of sadness. Perhaps it was because she remembered the long road they had already travelled together, and the countless small things Chen Ping'an had done when nobody asked him to do them. On one occasion, they had been travelling along a muddy mountain path during heavy rain when a huge pile of fallen rocks blocked the road. Pei Qian had thought the obvious solution was simply to walk around the obstruction and continue onward. Chen Ping'an did not. He stopped and began moving the rocks away one by one. Rain hammered the mountain, mud clung to the road. Darkness eventually swallowed the surrounding peaks. Yet Chen Ping'an continued working late into the night until the path had been cleared for travellers who might come after them. On another journey, they encountered a dilapidated wooden bridge. Chen Ping'an stood before it for a while, silently examining the broken structure. Then, without explanation, he rushed into the forest. When he returned, a large log rested across his shoulder. He cut the timber into wooden planks and carefully repaired the bridge piece by piece. Only after the crossing was safe did he finally continue on his way. And perhaps this is why Pei Qian's words carry more weight than simple admiration. Chen Ping'an did seem to fall into her life from nowhere, but the person she came to respect was built through countless choices no heavenly miracle could replace, moving one stone, repairing one bridge, leaving the road slightly better for strangers he would never meet. In a world of sword immortals, cultivation realms and legendary techniques, such acts may appear insignificant, yet Unsheathed repeatedly asks a deeper question. When the sword is finally sheathed and no enemy stands before you, what kind of person remains? For Chen Ping'an, perhaps the answer has always been hidden in these quiet moments along the road. That afternoon, Mountain Cliff Academy was unusually lively. An old scholar visiting Eastern Splendor Mountain had been invited by one of the Academy's assistant mountain masters to deliver a lecture, drawing students together beneath the solemn air of the Academy halls. Chen Ping'an and Pei Qian arrived just as the lecture was ending. Amid the dispersing crowd, a familiar streak of red darted between the students like an agile fish slipping through a river current. It was Li Baoping. She hurried from the building, clenched a small fist to encourage herself, and then spotted Chen Ping'an and Pei Qian. At once, she accelerated again, completely unconcerned with the eyes of everyone around her. Pei Qian watched with growing admiration. Big Sister Baoping truly seemed afraid of nothing. To Pei Qian, who was still learning how to find her own place in the world, Li Baoping's freedom and confidence were almost another kind of martial prowess. The three returned toward Chen Ping'an's guest room, and Li Baoping enthusiastically recounted everything she had seen. Most interesting of all was the white deer that had rested beside the old scholar throughout the lecture. According to the stories, when the old scholar had first established his private academy, that white deer came to protect him, preventing wild beasts from attacking and mountain spirits from damaging the grounds. Yet in Li Baoping's judgment, impressive though it was, this deer still could not compare to the one he Xiaoliang had once brought into the jewel's small world. The instant he Xiaoliang's name appeared, Chen Ping'an felt a familiar headache coming on. If fate were willing to show him mercy, he would have preferred never to encounter her again in this lifetime. He still remembered their first meeting beside the Dragon Whisker River, on that stone cliff where he had seen her white deer. Only much later, after questioning Cui Dongshan, did he understand how extraordinary that creature truly was. Its snow-white coat had merely been an illusion cast by Qi Zhen. Beneath that disguise was a 5-colored deer, a spiritual creature so precious that even cultivators of the upper 5 tiers coveted it. Such creatures generally followed only those blessed with astonishing fortune. And behind that meeting lay an even deeper scheme. With powers almost impossible to fathom, Lu Chen had constructed a bridge of fortune between Chen Ping'an and He Xiaoliang. When the dual small world eventually collapsed, the immense fortune released from its destruction was divided evenly between the two. But this was no simple gift from destiny. It was one piece of Lu Chen's design to sever Mr. Qi's scholarly lineage. That was what made Lu Chen's temptation so frightening. The bait was genuine fortune. The danger lay not in receiving nothing, but in accepting so much that one unknowingly surrendered the right to choose one's own path. Had another person stood in Chen Ping'an's position, they might already have been carried into white jade capital in the heavenly world, living what outsiders would call a glorious immortal existence, while slowly becoming little more than a beautifully decorated puppet. Through those experiences, Chen Ping'an learned something that no scripture could easily teach. Fortune and disaster were sometimes separated by no more than a single thought. His nature had allowed him to resist Lu Chen's attempt to lure him into white jade capital, but the experience left traces behind. For a long time, Chen Ping'an instinctively resisted entering broken small worlds, as though every shattered realm concealed another invisible hand arranging his fate. Only after travelling with Lu Tai and later speaking with Julian did his thinking gradually change. Instead of retreating from uncertainty, Chen Ping'an became increasingly determined to someday travel to the complete Reed continent. The complete Reed continent was a place where strength was revered above almost everything else in the majestic world. Even Confucian sages there sometimes had to rely upon their fists before others would listen to their principles. Chen Ping'an wanted to go there for one reason above all others: swordsmanship. He wanted to travel alone, cast aside distractions, and devote himself wholeheartedly to sharpening his sword.
How was the lecture?
Li Baoping considered the question seriously before giving her judgment.
Mister, Zhao says that a lecture from a wise man is like a lone crane flying from afar, and that merely glimpsing it can inspire enlightenment. I don't think that claim is completely baseless, but it sounds a little exaggerated to me.
What impressed me most was his idea that we can meet wise men of the past through their writings. Even if they died hundreds or thousands of years ago, he says that by carefully reading their works we can still discover the principles they valued most.
But Mr. Zhao didn't actually explain how to do that. Instead, he spent most of the lecture analyzing a particular Confucian classic in great detail, so I was a little disappointed. If I hadn't been rushing to see you, I would stayed behind and asked him how we're supposed to communicate with our predecessors through their writings.
Her disappointment said quite a lot about Li Baoping. She did not attend a lecture merely to memorize a sage's conclusions. She wanted to know the road by which those conclusions were reached. That hunger for understanding was precisely what separated genuine learning from the simple collection of impressive words.
Was this Mr. Zhao inspired by the teachings of Sage Lu from Swan Lake Academy in the southern Whirl continent?
Li Baoping immediately beamed.
You know so much, junior uncle. One of Mr. Zhao's ancestors was none other than Sage Lu.
Chen Ping'an remembered the Mountain and Sea Chronicle he had once gifted to Yu Lu. Its records stated that Sage Lu maintained a very good relationship with the pure Confucian Chen clan. That made Chen Ping'an wonder whether Liu Xianyang had managed to obtain an opportunity to meet the sage. Beside them, Pei Qian badly wanted to join the conversation. Unfortunately, she understood almost none of it. Worried that saying the wrong thing would make her appear foolish in front of Chen Ping'an and Li Baoping, she could only fall into gloomy silence. Chen Ping'an soon noticed. He lightly caught her by the ear and gave her a familiar scolding.
Do you see how knowledgeable your big sister Bei Qian is? Even though you aren't a student of the academy, you still have to work hard at your studies. Otherwise you'll be left behind.
Pei Qian stamped a foot, thoroughly unconvinced by the comparison.
But she's big sister Bei Qian. How could I possibly compare with her? Can't you compare me with somebody else? What about Huai? He studied at the academy for so many years, but I don't think I know any less than he does.
Chen Ping'an burst into laughter, released her ear, and affectionately patted her head. Pei Qian had somehow transformed an admonishment to study harder into an argument that Li Huai should be dragged down to her level. In the Jianghu of children, victory followed its own peculiar logic. When they returned to the guest room, Yu Lu was already waiting beneath the eaves beside Zhu Lian. The two appeared to be getting along quite well, and merely seeing Yu Lu caused some of the tension in Chen Ping'an's heart to ease. During the Academy's previous crisis, it had been Yu Lu who acted decisively. Even with a swordsman stronger than himself present, Yu Lu beat Li Changying so severely that the latter had to be carried down Eastern Splendor Mountain. After everyone ate, Chen Ping'an headed for Mao Xiaodong's study to continue discussing the refinement of his bonded item. Yu Lu was entrusted with watching Pei Qian. Li Baoping announced that she was returning to her dormitory to organize notes from Mr. Zhao's lecture. Pei Qian quickly found an excuse not to accompany her. She had something far more urgent to settle. She hurried into Chen Ping'an's guest room and emerged carrying her little treasure box. She and Li Huai had already agreed upon a confrontation worthy of legend, and the battlefield would be the summit of Eastern Splendor Mountain. Yu Lu escorted Pei Qian uphill, while Zhu Lian had already departed under Chen Ping'an's orders to secretly protect Li Baoping. When Pei Qian reached the summit, Li Huai was waiting. Before him rested his yellow wooden box. Pei Qian grinned broadly and set her own treasure box upon the stone table, while Yu Lu claimed a nearby stool, curious to discover what sort of earth-shaking confrontation these two children had prepared. Li Huai stared at Pei Qian's treasure box with the solemnity of a cultivator facing an ancient enemy.
You can make the first move.
Pei Qian opened her 9-compartment treasure box. Within lay an intricately carved wooden Ganoderma, several rare coins purchased by Yao Jinqi, and an old Daoist badge engraved with a red-faced Daoist enforcer wearing golden armor and a red robe, with a heavenly eye upon his glabella. Chen Ping'an had previously appraised the collection. Aside from the Daoist enforcer badge and the wooden Ganoderma, the remaining pieces were merely valuable mortal objects rather than genuine immortal artifacts. Pei Qian delicately drew out the Daoist badge and placed it upon the table like a master, revealing her opening technique.
Take this.
Li Huai answered by opening his wooden box and producing a clay figure of a wandering swordsman. He crossed his arms, his confidence soaring.
I have a sword immortal who can protect me and kill my enemies. What are you going to do?
Pei Qian immediately countered by producing her wooden Ganoderma.
Even if your sword immortal hits me, Ganodermas are powerful medicine. Mine will save my life. What else have you got?
Li Huai gave a cold harumph and revealed his second clay figure, a night watchman carrying a gong.
My night watchman will keep striking his gong until you can't stand it anymore.
Pei Qian sneered and spread her collection of rare coins across the stone table.
Money can corrupt even the best of men. Who says your night watchman won't switch sides and bang that gong next to you instead?
Li Huai was prepared. A third figure appeared, this one an armor-clad general.
This general is my most loyal subordinate. Try bribing him and he'll teach you exactly how useless your money is.
Before Pei Qian could answer, Li Huai launched another attack. He produced a Daoist priest holding a horsetail whisk.
This is a deity from a Daoist temple. One sweep of his horsetail whisk can split mountains and part seas. Do you surrender?
This time, Pei Qian did not reach into her treasure box. Instead, she carefully drew the scented pouch Lady Guai had given her from her sleeve. She first turned away and secretly removed her pocket money, an osmanthus branch, and an osmanthus leaf, hiding them away before placing the emptied pouch on the table.
This cosmic bag can devour every immortal ability and treasure. Your horsetail whisk is nothing.
Then she triumphantly brought out the translucent osmanthus branch.
This branch came from an osmanthus tree in the Moon Palace. If I plant it today, by tomorrow it'll become an osmanthus tree taller than a house.
Li Huai immediately deployed his final clay figure, a celestial maiden riding an immortal crane.
This maidservant of mine rides an immortal crane. The crane can simply pick up your osmanthus branch and carry it away.
Pei Qian immediately removed the bamboo sword and saber from her waist and slammed both onto the table.
My sword will cut the crane's talons, and my saber will defeat your maidservant.
At last, Li Huai brought forth his true trump card, the painted wooden doll, roughly half an arm in height and far superior to the clay figures Wei Jin had given him.
My almighty general will catch your sword and saber with his hands and snap both in half.
From there, all order collapsed. Their legendary duel became a chaotic battle of imagination. Pei Qian produced her hiking pole and the remaining mortal treasures in her box. Li Huai countered with his copy of Severed Watercliff and even displayed the spirits that Liang had once thrust into the book. Yet exchange after exchange, Pei Qian slowly gained the advantage. No true immortal techniques were being unleashed, no mountains were splitting, and no seas were parting, but neither child seemed aware of that minor detail. In their eyes, every treasure had become a divine weapon, and every boast a killing move. By now, the entire stone table was covered beneath the treasures of their respective collections. Yulu watched with genuine interest, increasingly uncertain whether he should be more impressed by their possessions or by their completely unrestrained imaginations. Finally, Li Huai released a long sigh, cupped his fist toward Pei Qian, and conceded like a defeated hero of the Jianghu.
All right, I admit defeat. I am a brave and upstanding man, and when unbeaten, I know how to concede.
Pei Qian crossed her arms and nodded with the solemn approval of an established grandmaster.
That's fine. Even though you lost, you preserved your dignity. There are many heroes in the martial arts world who can fight me this well.
Li Huai immediately turned toward their sole witness.
Yulu, you are extremely fortunate to have witnessed this showdown for the ages.
Pei Qian maintained her dignified grandmaster demeanor.
I'm not someone who likes being showered with worthless praise. Just remember what you saw here. There's no need to tell anyone else.
Pei Qian and Li Huai looked at one another, and the solemn martial atmosphere instantly shattered as both broke into enormous grins. Fierce rivals were difficult to find, and after this battle, each had developed a heartfelt appreciation for the other. Pei Qian was already thinking that when Li Huai eventually left the academy on educational excursions, she would personally show him what the cultivation world was really like. Li Huai, meanwhile, was thinking almost the same thing from the opposite direction. If he ever embarked upon a long journey, he definitely wanted Pei Qian with him. They got along well. She knew far more about the cultivation world than he did, and having such a companion nearby would make him feel much safer. Their grand battle had been childish, but the friendship forming beneath it was genuine. One imagined herself guiding the other imagined relying upon her for safety. Without realizing it, both had already begun reserving a place for the other in their future journeys. Off to the side, Yulu remained almost speechless. He was stunned by two things in equal measure: the quantity of precious items these children possessed, and the astonishing thickness of their skin. Li Huai had skipped a lesson to attend this summit duel, so there were fortunately no students or visitors nearby. Yulu was spared the trouble of explaining what was happening, and simply allowed the children to pack their treasures away slowly. As the former prince of the Lu Empire, once renowned across the northern eastern treasured vile continent for its tremendous wealth, Yulu had seen more valuable objects than most cultivators could dream of encountering. In that regard, even a prodigy like Xianxia would probably struggle to match his experience. That was why his judgment carried weight. The collections belonging to Pei Qian and Li Huai were wealthy enough to rival the possessions of a Dragon Gate tier cultivator. Setting aside bonded items, there were even itinerant Golden Core tier Earth Immortals who might possess less wealth than these two children. That comparison quietly revealed how extraordinary the people surrounding Chen Ping'an had become. To Pei Qian and Li Huai, these objects were pieces in an imaginary contest. To experienced cultivators, the same table would have looked like a small treasury. Yulu looked toward Pei Qian and decided to tease her.
Pei Qian, aren't you worried that seeing all these treasures will tempt me to steal your collection?
Pei Qian rolled her eyes and looked at him as though he had just asked the most foolish question imaginable.
You're my master's friend. How could I not trust your integrity?
Yu Lu found himself completely unable to answer. Meanwhile, inside Mao Xiaodong's study, the atmosphere could not have been more different. The playful clash on the mountain summit gave way to a matter that could shape Chen Ping'an's entire cultivation path. Chen Ping'an and Mao Xiaodong meticulously simulated every stage required for the refinement of Chen Ping'an's bonded item. When they had gone through the entire process, Mao Xiaodong placed a hand upon the ruler hanging from his waist. One natural treasure after another emerged from the ruler and floated gently onto the table, 18 in total, varying greatly in size, rarity, and value. Each was required for the refinement of a scholarly core. 6 materials were still missing. 4 were already on their way to Mountain Cliff Academy, but the remaining 2 were exceptionally difficult to obtain. Substitutes existed, yet using them would lower the quality of the final scholarly core. Mao Xiaodong had no desire to compromise. His hopes for this refinement were extremely high. He wanted the bonded item residing in Chen Ping'an's second acupoint to be flawless. There were also several things Mao Xiaodong deliberately kept from Chen Ping'an. Part of him wanted the final result to be a surprise. More importantly, he feared that revealing too much beforehand would only burden Chen Ping'an with hesitation and unnecessary worry. A successfully refined scholarly core could be compared to a powerful noble establishing a manor, or a general planting his command flag upon a battlefield. Once established, it could influence how spiritual energy gathered around its owner. A metal attribute scholarly core, for example, could significantly improve spiritual energy absorption in certain western and southwestern regions of scenic locations, yet geography was only one part of the equation. A scholarly core could also resonate with its owner's innate nature. Someone possessing a metal attribute scholarly core who was naturally headstrong and carried powerful killing intent could advance far more rapidly along the path of cultivation. In other words, a bonded item was not merely a treasure placed inside the body. At its highest level, it became a structure that magnified the cultivator's own nature. The closer the person, element, method, and fortune aligned, the more terrifying the final result could become. But those were characteristics common to metal attribute bonded items in general. Chen Ping'an's prospective scholarly core involved circumstances far more obscure. Mao Xiaodong had uncovered the secret in an exceedingly obscure book, obscure enough that he believed even Cui Dongshan knew nothing about it. To refine the flawless golden scholarly core Mao Xiaodong envisioned, every prerequisite had to align. The cultivator needed immense fortune. He had to excel in battle. His personality had to resonate with the scholarly qi within the core, and the refinement itself required a top-tier method. Only when all of those conditions were simultaneously satisfied could such an extraordinary scholarly core be born. And its effects could be remarkable. If the owner entered a place steeped in filth and corruption, the scholarly core would not necessarily make him immune to every evil influence, nor would it automatically repel every sinister entity. Even so, it would grant him an innate advantage when confronting beings that did not belong to the righteous path. It was similar to the ancient flood dragons that once ruled rivers, lakes, and seas, whose bloodline naturally allowed them to suppress and command lesser aquatic beings. For Chen Ping'an, who repeatedly found himself walking into places haunted by old grudges, ghosts, schemes, and broken destinies, such an advantage would be far more than decorative. If Mao Xiaodong succeeded, this bonded item could become one of the foundations supporting Chen Ping'an through countless future dangers. Chen Ping'an carefully inspected the 18 treasures upon the table, while Mao Xiaodong finally explained their next step.
Over the next few days, you and I will visit the Confucian temples and several other locations in the capital. where scholarly fortune is abundant. Well, go at night, so we can avoid as many prying eyes as possible.
I need to collect some scholarly fortune from the deities there. Part of that fortune was deposited with them by Mountain Cliff Academy.
To speak plainly, that scholarly fortune was essentially our share of the profits from certain arrangement. The Great Sui imperial clan and the Ministry of Rights will simply pretend they see nothing. After all, merely bringing that scholarly fortune back to Eastern Splendor Mountain. And as you yourself said, Eastern Splendor Mountain still lies within Great Sui territory. During those visits, stay beside me and don't say anything. Bringing you, because I also want to see whether any opportunities involving scholarly fortune belong specifically to you.
Mao Xiaodong clearly anticipated Chen Ping'an's discomfort before Chen Ping'an even voiced it.
Does that sound improper to you? If so, your thinking is mistaken. Right now you only understand battles between Confucian scholarly lineages at the most superficial level. You can see what happens on the surface, but you don't yet understand what those actions truly mean.
For now, there's no need for you to concern yourself with those matters. Just follow my instruction, and don't be nervous. I'm not asking you to accept some scholarly lineage and devote your entire life to it.
Chen Ping'an nodded. Mao Xiaodong then became even more candid. The capital was no longer merely a destination for gathering scholarly fortune. Trouble was gathering there, and beneath the surface, currents of danger were beginning to converge.
There's a great deal of trouble brewing in the capital right now. Before long, it'll become extremely dangerous. Truthfully, I have another reason for taking you out of the academy. Doing so can help you escape the predicament you're currently trapped in. But the plan carries considerable risk. What do you think?
There was no need to disguise the meaning. Mao Xiaodong intended to use Chen Ping'an as bait. Yet, the most revealing part of Chen Ping'an's reaction was that his first concern was not his own safety. His thoughts immediately turned toward what would happen to Mao Xiaodong once the mountain master stepped beyond the territory where his authority was strongest.
Of course, I'm willing to do as you say. But once you leave the academy, won't that be like a sage leaving the territory under his protection? If they choose to attack you away from the academy, won't you be in great danger?
Mao Xiaodong chuckled, apparently far less worried about the matter.
Even away from Eastern Splendor Mountain, it would take at least an unpolished jade-tier cultivator to bring me down. Upper 5-tier cultivators in the Eastern Treasured Vial continent aren't little toys that Pei Qian and Li Huai can summon whenever they please. Great Sui has only one unpolished jade-tier cultivator, the ancestor of the Jiangao clan, and he's merely a storyteller who isn't particularly skilled in battle. Besides, after Du Mao's death, fragments of his colored glaze golden body have already fallen across the Eastern Treasured Vial continent. The old monsters, capable of competing for treasures of that level, people like Heavenly Lord Kai Zhen of the Divine Edict, sect the Jiang clan's old ancestor, and that unpolished jade-tier itinerant cultivator from Wasp Tail Ferry Station are undoubtedly far too busy scheming against one another to spare time for me. As for people like Huai Jin of Wind, Snow, Temple Thave, gathered in the central region of the continent, and are preparing for a battle against Heavenly Lord Zai, she of the complete Reed continent.
Mao Xiaodong's casual enumeration painted a startling picture. More than 200 nations existed on the Eastern Treasured Vial continent, yet the number of native upper 5-tier cultivators was so low that he could count them using 2 hands.
Before Cui Chan and Kai Jingshan came to the Eastern Treasured Vial continent, perhaps I could have counted them all on a single hand. So it isn't surprising that cultivators from other continents look down upon us. In most respects, we simply cannot compare. Except in martial arts, perhaps. Song Changjing and Lai are both still very young, and having 2 10th-tier martial artists emerge from the same continent within such a short period has certainly caused quite a stir.
The contrast was striking. In immortal cultivation, the eastern treasured vile continent appeared impoverished beside its neighbours. Yet in pure martial arts, Song Changjing and Li had forced the wider world to pay attention. Sometimes a weak land did not need 100 great experts. 2 sufficiently monstrous individuals could already shake its reputation. Since Song Changjing had been mentioned, Chen Ping'an told Mao Xiaodong about the bounty placed upon Song Changjing's head by the Daoist saber room of Stalactite Mountain. Mao Xiaodong smiled, unsurprised by the contempt behind such actions.
The rest of the majestic world has long grown accustomed to looking down upon the eastern treasured vile continent. If you travel to another continent and announce where you come from, you'll encounter that contempt often enough.
Then Mao Xiaodong shifted the conversation toward a person whose shadow still lingered over Mountain Cliff Academy.
After Mountain Cliff Academy was founded, Cui Dongshan spent the first 20 or 30 years devoting himself to a single task. Do you know what it was?
Chen Ping'an shook his head.
He painstakingly nurtured batch after batch of promising young scholars for the great Li Empire.
But nearly all of those scholars treated Mountain Cliff Academy as nothing more than a stepping stone. What they truly wanted was to enter the more prestigious Lakeview Academy. Cui Dongshan never stopped them. Worse still, he had to personally write letters of recommendation for those students praising them, so that Lakeview Academy would be more willing to accept them.
Chen Ping'an was stunned.
Back then, almost every scholar in the great Li Empire believed that any virtuous scholar or noble scholar from Lakeview Academy would be better at transmitting the teachings of the sages than the mountain master of Mountain Cliff Academy himself.
Silence descended upon the study. There was a cruelty in that history sharper than open hostility. Qi Jingchun had nurtured talented scholars only to watch them leave, and then personally helped open the doors through which they departed. He could have obstructed them. Instead, he respected their choices even when those choices amounted to a rejection of himself. Mao Xiaodong turned toward the window. A self-mocking expression crossed his face as memories of an old scholarly lineage resurfaced.
And so in the end, Cui Dongshan, myself, and even our teacher were never able to settle who truly qualified as our direct disciples. Isn't that amusing?
All the other great scholarly lineages had countless disciples organized into strict generations and hierarchies, while we could only stand aside and watch with resignation.
Chen Ping'an could think of no answer. Words seemed too light for what Mao Xiaodong had just revealed. So instead, he removed the sword-nurturing gourd from his waist and took a quiet sip of wine. Mao Xiaodong walked to the window. Outside, the last light of day had already disappeared, and eastern Splendor Mountain lay beneath the deepening night. When Mao Xiaodong turned back, he found Chen Ping'an holding the sword-nurturing gourd and hesitating over whether he should take another drink. One side of eastern Splendor Mountain had just witnessed 2 children proudly declaring a make-believe showdown for the ages. Here, in a quiet study beneath the night, Chen Ping'an was being shown battles of another kind. Battles between scholarly lineages, battles over fortune, and battles whose wounds could remain long after every sword had been sheathed. And with trouble already gathering in the Great Sui capital, his next step would carry him directly toward those hidden currents.